I wanted a place for people to receive authentic guidance and practical ways to awaken. Thought-provoking, paradigm-shifting, and empowering. This is about expanding our human consciousness to create a wave of new possibilities. I'm Dr. Theresa Bullard-Whyke, and this is Quantum Minds TV. Welcome back to Quantum Minds TV, where we take a deep dive into various perspectives on what it's going to take to create a shift in human consciousness. In this episode, we're continuing the conversation with Steve Rees, who is a sound healer, musician, and researcher into healing frequencies. So one of the things I wanted to come back to was Pythagoras, who you'd mentioned before. And Pythagoras was certainly one of the greats of the ancient, mystery school teachings. He had his own mystery school. He talked about the music of the spheres. He talked about how music was in so many different things. He looked at how the harmonics and the ratios between different objects and so forth, and the placement of the stars and everything was very much harmonics, music, mathematics, sacred geometry. They even talked about how sacred geometry was frozen music because the same ratios that were pleasing to the ears were the same ones that were pleasing to the eyes, and created this sense of beauty and aesthetic and harmony. So I wanted to just have you share a little bit more on Pythagoras and what you've come into awareness about in regards to music and healing music and so forth.
Yeah, I was reading one point, he mentioned that music was the best healer. So he even understood the healing qualities of music way back then. And obviously I guess my best connection with Pythagoras was just using his numeric formula for finding the patterns in the scripture there. Yeah, and he also, as you mentioned, he was the first one to describe the ratios of music, or he made what he called a sound box, where he measured the distances of the wavelengths, essentially, which we now understand better. I don't know if once again, technology, what was it back then? We don't know for sure. But he left us with so much more knowledge about music. Now, just for an instance, when we talk about 528 as the music, as the miracle frequency or God created frequency, if you cut that in half down to 250, 260, what would that be? 266 or I don't know. I'm not doing my math very good in my head. But anyway, cut it in half. You end up with the same note, but one octave lower. And if you double that up to 1056, you'd have the same C note, but it'd be an octave higher.
Right.
And so the interesting thing about that is, so a lot of people, when you're looking at, say, the frequency of an organ that we were talking about earlier, it may be a frequency that's really a smaller number. Well, if we took one of the solfeggio frequencies and halved it, we would probably get right to that number or very close, because it's still the same thing, but it's resonating at a lower pitch than at a higher pitch. So like when I play a note on the harp, say I play a C note, if I touch the other C strings, they're going to be vibrating. There's this subharmonic resonance that's going on. And so when we talk about resonance or harmonics, what we're talking about is things vibrating in unison. And so Pythagoras understood that. He was the first one to actually formulate it so that we could actually mathematically describe it. So yeah, very, very important work.
Yeah, that brings us also back to entrainment.
Yes, entrainment, exactly.
Entrainment factor. And one of the things I loved about, Pythagoras, of course, I love numerology in general. And I think that when you're studying any of the ancient wisdom, you really need to look at the numerology because it was so embedded within most ancient languages and
Right.
the way that they thought back then.
Yeah.
So, the math, the music, and the sacred geometry being, I think Godel called it like a golden thread. They're woven together like a golden braid, the three together. And when it comes to some of the work of Pythagoras, he even talked about the music of the spheres being like the placement of the planets was going to follow the same rules of harmonics, and these ratios of the octaves. And Kepler even tried to create a model of the placement of the orbits of the planets being according to the sacred geometries of the platonic solids nested
Exactly.
in each other, which use similar kinds of ratios. And it's not 100%, but it's really close. Like it's a really good approximation.
Well,
And
even
then
our
Pythagoras, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, even our body dimensions
Yeah,
and ratios, how big our arms are compared to our legs and all that.
yeah.
All of those follow the same Fibonacci numbers, the golden means. Yeah.
Golden ratio, yeah. And so they say in the ancient teachings that man is the measure of all things because of this exact concept that we have that golden ratio all over our body, and
Right.
it is within the construct of us. And then we can see the principle of correspondence, as above, so below.
Right.
That this same ratio is out in nature, it's out in the universe. And
Intercellular.
Pythagoras literally talked about being able to hear the sounds of the cosmos, the music of the spheres. And we know today that, as a planet rotates on its axis and then orbits around the sun, that it is creating ripples
Right.
in the fabric of space-time in a way, and it is putting out frequencies from its atmosphere. And NASA has even measured these and then translated these into music.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's not always like musically beautiful, but it's interesting when you listen. I've listened to them, and it's really interesting when you listen to them. The sounds that they make actually have the same essence, or the feeling in the body that is created is the same as their archetypal correspondences, like from astrology, for example. Like Jupiter is bright and expansive, and Saturn, kind of sounds a little bit spooky, and it's pretty interesting how
it is.
And Pythagoras even said that when somebody is initiated or awakened at a high enough level, that they too would be able to hear the music of the spheres. Have you ever found yourself tuning into, even if it's not an auditory, but just tuning into that kind of a inspiration from the universe?
Yeah, I don't think I've ascended that high yet, but but I have listened to it on the YouTubes that are out there on it, and it's fascinating. It really is. I think that I had a thought and it just slipped my brain.
That's okay. Well, let's come to.
It'll come back.
There's two final topics I wanted to discuss in terms of how music and working with sound healing and vibrational tuning can really support or be a part of this process of helping humanity shift consciousness.
Right.
And one of the things that you shared with me the other day was how you felt that music and the right frequencies were really a way to connect back to source or to creator. So can you expand a little bit more on how you feel it does that in a spiritual way?
And that's one reason why I like to take that 528 frequency. And you think about all the things that we know that it does within the natural world. And then, as I mentioned a little bit ago, that the Yod He Vav He actually works out to be 528 frequency. And so it's interesting because Genesis 1:1, or very close to there, says, in the beginning he created. And then it says he said, "Let there be light," but I wonder if he didn't sing "Let there be light" in 528 frequency.
Mm.
And so if then, you know, just to go with that thought, if he used frequencies to create with, which I think he did, then I really think that um, it's one of the things that can help us move towards that state that we were originally created in, is to, like, if I leave my harp in the corner for a couple of weeks and don't play it, and I come back and try to play something on it, it doesn't sound very good because it's gotten out of tune.
Mm.
And that's the law of entropy we talked about earlier. Um, so what I have to do is tune it up, and then it can be played and sounds beautiful again. So what's to say that we don't get out of tune?
Yeah.
And that it's important for us to periodically get back in tune. So
Yeah.
I just don't see I don't see a negative there. I don't see how that wouldn't be possible. And I think understanding the frequencies is really a move towards helping us actually do that. So.
Mm. I like that, because one of the analogies I often use in some of my lectures is that we are learning to tune ourselves into a state of coherence. And if we imagine that we're not just a single string instrument, we're a multi-string instrument. We have many different vibrational levels that we operate at. We're multidimensional in that kind of center, multimodal. And so we need to learn how to tune our various dimensions or frequency levels of the self into the right tuning to be harmonious with each other, to be tuned to the right frequencies, and then harmonious with each other, to be able to then start learning how to be master musicians of our instrument,
Right.
And then be able to contribute to a cosmic symphony. So if we want to be, you know, part of the grand orchestra, we have to learn to achieve that level of mastery. And not only do we have to learn how to tune ourselves, we have to get really good at keeping it in tune and then playing our instrument from a very conscious level.
We'd now like you to enjoy a short consciousness break in the quantum gap with some healing harp music by Steve Rees.
Another thing to think about is that the timing has to be good. Okay, so if several are playing together and one of them's out of time, then it kind of destroys the whole effect of what the music is trying to do. And so I think that one of the things that makes music so powerful is that it does bring us into harmony. It does bring us into that unity. It does create that orchestral effect that you were just talking about. And so that, I think that's another one of the powers of music in our lives, how it can change us as a community, as a society. You know, when we have all of these things that are trying to split us apart going on in the political and all the others, if music can do just the opposite, it can bring us together. And I think that's another really important reason why we need it so much in our lives.
Very well said, because one of the biggest issues in the world is the separation But the more there are things that we focus on that create further separation, the more the world keeps falling apart.
Right.
What we really need, the biggest themes to bring us forward in a greater awakening or creating a better world is unity.
Right.
And music has always been used as a way to bring the community together,
Right.
from ancient shamanic and indigenous times. I mean, they would gather together as a tribe. They would play their music, whatever the instruments were for them in that area. And it would bring everyone together, harmonize everyone, and train everyone, bring a state of coherence again to the tribe. And then, of course, there would be the storytelling or the teachings that would come on top of that. So I love that you emphasize that potential for music to bring unity, not just harmony, but unity amongst people. And this is a way to reach. It's a universal language, right? Music is a universal language that transcends the barriers of culture and different languages that humans tend to speak.
Every culture has had some form of music.
And everyone can appreciate music, even if it's from a completely different cultural kind of way of doing it. We can all appreciate music.
And interestingly enough, you bring up the orchestral effect. There are different instruments, so unity doesn't mean uniformity. It means because there's room for all of these different expressions that come together with the so.
Very well said. I love that and that's super important, that we can be united and yet still have our individuality, still bring our unique gifts and creativity into the mix, but in a way where we have to find that it harmonizes and collaborates with others to enhance the orchestral effect, versus you might be great, but if you kind of try to be the one who's shining above all the others and it's in contrast to, it's not necessarily going to work. So it's about community, unity, and yet that individuality within the diversity within the connection and the community. And so I think music also helps us not only return to oneness and unity with each other, but also in a transcendent way helps us return to that connection to source. And you mentioned before that God spoke, or maybe God sung, the creator sung the universe into being. And this is one of the many ancient traditions also say this, that the universe was sung, that the creation was a great song. So whether it's the word and speaking it, or singing, and music and vibration, it is a way to create that connection to the source again. And in that book that I mentioned before, The World is Sound, there's a beautiful quote that the ear is a gateway to transcendence.
Wow.
And that higher state of consciousness in a way that really moves the soul. And music is one of those things that can just open up so many gates within us that can create that higher state. So
that's interesting. Even in scripture it says, he that has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says. So
exactly.
That's pretty cool.
For those who have ears to hear.
Right, exactly.
Let them hear these messages. And so, Steve, is there anything else that you would like to share just as a final message to everyone that might support their process in shifting consciousness to a higher way of being?
I just remembered one thing I was going to say. I was listening to Michio Kaku. I may not be saying his name right, but he's one of the proponents of string theory. And he's in one of his little talks, he said, if you want to understand God, if you were to know God, he said, I'm not necessarily saying that I believe in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, but he said, if you want to know God, you have to think mathematics, because the universe is mathematics. And here he is, a physicist that works in these higher math equations and things. But when you were saying about the distribution of planets, the music of the spheres, all of these, the ways the planets are distributed and everything, it just, even to think about the Big Bang Theory, maybe that bang was that voice of God in the creation process,
The big drum beat coming out.
Exactly, so maybe what we're trying to describe in our little human minds was really a much bigger thing of God's voice, I don't know what that one, but anyway, but to think that then all of the distribution of the planets and everything's what they're describing more and more as the Hubble telescope has given us more knowledge, is that there's this incredible spacing that isn't just random, that it actually does match these ratios that we see in the golden mean and such. And it's like, so for me, personally, it gives me such great hope and understanding to know that I'm not just here by accident, that there actually is a creator who, one of the Psalms, Psalm 139 says that when I was in darkness in my mother's womb, he was forming me, and before my parts were yet formed, he was creating me, and I just think about this incredible design that went into even myself being, and you, and anybody, and all of us. And so instead of being this hopeless descendant through this evolutionary process that took millions of years and things, and I don't know how long it took or anything, I'm not going into that, but just to think about, instead of being a random accident, to transferring that into being a designed creation by a creator who was very smart. That, and then to look at all of the designs in the universe, and then to be going into these frequencies, it's not by accident that these frequencies are so important. It was designed that way. And to me, that just gives me such incredible hope. If I'm, like we were talking about, if I'm wanting to ascend back to that place where we fell from, it really gives me a lot better encouragement to think that there's a design to that, rather than just stumbling through this process, And for me, that just that makes all the difference in the world.
Well, that's beautifully said, and coming from a real place of humbleness and a sense of awe.
Awe, it's a good word. Yeah,
that's one of the things that I, as a physicist, the more I studied math, the more I studied the universe and the astrophysics behind our cosmos, the more I was in awe at the interconnections, at the perfect tuning that is here within even the constant, like the fundamental constants that rule our universe. They're perfectly tuned. If even one of them was just a little off tune, the universe as we know would not have come to be. Life as we know would not have come to be. And so to me, it just speaks that there is intelligence and there is intention behind this.
Absolutely.
And the intention was an intention for life, the intention for life to thrive, not just on our planet, but maybe all over the universe.
That's right.
But we are here in this amazing universe. And anytime we talk about mathematics as the language of God, we also have to talk about sacred geometry and music and harmony and how all of these things fit together, because that is what creates a functioning whole, an ordered system. And yes, there might be, this tendency towards entropy and disorder, but the thing that brings it back towards order is our intentional interaction to direct it towards a creative use. Energy. We give it our energy. And so that intention, that consciousness, it's like the universe ultimately is leading towards, I believe, higher forms of order, not disorder.
I agree. Yeah.
And that is our consciousness that helps direct that process. So the more that we awaken, the more that we can be active participants in this cosmic orchestra and learn to play those super strings potentially that Michio Kaku talks about. But definitely play the strings of our own instrument and our own consciousness and beyond our physical body into our soul, our mind, our spirit, and at all the levels of our being.
Amen. So, yeah, absolutely.
Steve, thank you so much for joining us and for sharing with us your perspectives, your musical talent, and we'll look forward to sharing more of your music as well. And we hope that people will go and check that out, and we'll be putting in the links for everyone down below for them to also get connected to getting some of your albums.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. It's been a lot of fun. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. So thank you, everyone. That brings us to the end of this conscious conversation with Steve Rees, and we hope that you have enjoyed.
This conscious conversation was created, produced, and recorded by Dr. Theresa Bullard-Whyke in collaboration with Steve Rees and edited by HH Films and Photo. The theme music was created by Tim Mountain of Even Load Productions. Quantum Minds TV is a product of the Quantum Learning Academy.